I'm here with two panels and connections of mine. This is Ilias, Anwar of tappedai and TCC Entertainment. Let me know if I'm missing anything there.
Yeah.
And Bert Riemann, who runs Cypher, which is a music licensing platform. You guys want to tell us a little bit more about yourselves? What do you do?
Let's you go first.
You want to go first?
Sure. I guess, so you kind of hit it on the head. I'm running two companies right now, known as TCC Entertainment, which is like an event production company, video production company, and then we help with digital marketing. And then we have Tapped, which is now known as TappedX, and after today, we're going to be rebranding completely. And this is the first time we've ever said it, so hopefully we can use this clip as one of the announcement posts. But we actually quote-unquote shut down for like a month or two because we were focusing on working on like the B2B side of our company. And we wanted to come back really strong, and then there were some issues when we were going by tappedai on like the B2C end of communicating with customers. And so we're dropping the AI out of the name and going with TappedX from this point on. And then obviously, you know, I throw a lot of events around the city for creators, VCs, investors, and I post online as well, just like showcasing my journey as a founder and building the companies that I'm working on.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear it, and Burke.
Yeah, if you don't follow him after this. Has a lot of good content. It's good to meet you all, and thanks all on the Zoom link. My name's Burke. I'm one of the co-founders of Cypher. We're a music licensing platform, and we're really aimed at licensing music at scale in the era of social media and digital. If you don't know, we focus on a specific license, which is called sync licensing, but you can basically just throw that out the window. What that means is, you have, if a company wants to use a piece of music for whatever commercial purposes, they simply just have to get payment, and they have to get permission from anyone that owns that piece of music. That process has been, that hasn't really ran into a couple of issues for the longest time, and that's just because the volume wasn't really ever there. But ever since Facebook started in the early 2000s, all of a sudden anyone can post anything. From about 2005 to 2020, is basically the Wild West of commercials and companies using music without permission. Something around 2020, I'm not sure what it was to be honest, but a lot of the rights holders, a lot of the record labels and publishers have been coming down with massive lawsuits. And it's still just, there's no solution to be able to do that. So that's what we focus in. I have a soft spot for all these sessions because I recently just graduated from Cornell's master's program, actually on Roosevelt Island. Most people don't know what the hell Roosevelt Island is, but that's where the New York City
Cornell Tech.
Yeah. It is pretty. I used to host a bunch of these events as well, so thank you so much for having us, and we're excited to connect with the students here.
Of course, thank you for being here. So yeah, thank you both for being here. The first question I have, so you guys work, is it fair to say that you guys work in sort of like the music data field when it comes to the work that you're doing within the industry?
Should I go first?
You got it.
Okay. So we work in kind of almost just aggregating and allowing our users to be able to use that music data. I think we're affected by the music data, and that's because the rights is so fragmented and segmented across the industry. So you've got 6 different publishers, 2 with a co-publishing deal, 1 with an ELA license agreement on page 60 of that, and all of a sudden the song that you're trying to use for whatever purposes, commercial purposes, you have like 30 people that you need to reach out to. So that's what we're affected in. We don't personally, actually aggregate that, but we simply just kind of partner with who owns it and who wants to use it.
No, I mean, yeah, sync licensing is huge, and it is a beast of a thing to navigate at points.
It sucks.
So
It's very hard to navigate. I'm blessed to say that we're in live events data, which has a lot less red tape, even though there is a lot of red tape with having like monopolies like Live Nation or Dice to be able to aggregate a lot of that data. We focus more on like the independent venues, and we're trying to facilitate partnerships to still be working with those companies, but you're working on a completely different end, my man. I don't know how you guys are doing it, but it's a headache for us already as it is, so I definitely applaud you guys for doing it the way that you guys are.
Both of you guys are working on very awesome fronts, and that brings me to my next question, which is, so as you guys probably know, we focus a lot on AI research in the context of music, so what I wanted to know, and I'm sure that we all are wondering as well, is how do you guys use AI in what you're doing? Because I know you guys both do in some capacity.
Yeah, I think, you're probably gonna have a better answer because we actually don't really work directly with generative music and kind of net new production of music. we're affected by AI and how we're kind of implementing it for more admin work. So kind of helping our users navigate the complexities of sync licensing, but that's obviously on our own choosing. We're also affected by specifically generative music because it's changing kind of the value most consumers and users are putting on human-generated music and computer-generated music. So our whole bread and butter is licensing out human-generated music, music that people actually connect with in like a good or bad way, but it gets a reaction. And so now with like the influx and more finite and accurate models and cheaper models, with kind of this wave of generated music coming in, will brands now start to use AI generated music, or like still stay with human music? That's going to affect us in one way or another.
Yeah, and for us, I mean, the AI that we have on the back end is basically taking a look at all the venues that we have on the platform. So if you're an artist, it's very easy for you front facing, but what's happening on the back end is you are an artist, you go on the app, you see thousands of venues. Now the biggest issue is that a lot of the times artists will just take what they can get, or sometimes they'll just perform at a venue and that might not necessarily be the right thing for them to be at, right? Let's say there's a rock venue down the street, but I'm a jazz performer. I shouldn't really be performing at that place. There's a spot down the street that maybe I can now allocate all my attention towards to get booked over there. And so what our AI is doing is helping you with that decision making, so that way you don't have to do it at all, and then to also help facilitate the conversation. So a lot of the times when I used to be a booking agent or a promoter, I would have my artist friends come up to me and they would hand me the email and they'd be like, hey, send this email for me. And so not only does our AI help you with becoming more presentable in terms of helping you with how to facilitate communication with these venues, but by pinpointing the right venues and then also creating like an EPK, which is essentially, for maybe people who don't know about that, is like a resume when you are like trying to sell yourself to these venues for them to book you. And then the event flyers are just as important as well. Sometimes artists don't have connections to designers, or they make a really weird wonky flyer that doesn't look good and people don't want to come to those types of events. And so that's kind of where we help. It's like we want to help these artists get booked, but it's not as easy as getting booked. You also have to be presentable, you have to communicate properly, and you got to make sure that you're performing at the right place.
Of course. So, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, and I'm somewhat familiar with the platform that you guys have, and I know a couple people who use it, and it seems to work really well on those fronts.
Yeah.
So, would it be fair to say that, Burke, what you're doing is somewhere in between the lines of, like, somewhere in the lines of music information retrieval to a degree? Because you're sifting through human-generated music versus AI-generated music. And for you, it's more on the analytics side of artists.
So I'd say we're not like crossing that threshold of like signal processing or information retrieval. That kind of goes over our head, or at least I'll speak for myself, goes over my head. But we are, looking at what's trending. We're focused on, a lot of our competitors will gather 90 million songs, 100 million songs in the world and say, oh, this is all the songs that we have the rights for that you can then go and get clearance for. We call BS, but that's also just like an incredibly inefficient waste of your time. Only because we know that in licensing, only like a little under 3% of all the world's music is ever used for licensing. So why would I care about getting 100 million songs? So to answer your question, we focus on the top, we don't have a number, but top 1,000, top 2,000, top 10,000 songs. Gotcha. And those are typically human-generated music, because that's what resonates with the people in this room.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess that brings me to another question, because I wanted to get your guys' takes on, a couple of different things regarding AI-generated music versus human-generated music, because ilias, that would affect your clients, and that would also affect yours as well to a degree, which you kind of covered. But I don't want to gauge, do you think that there is a threshold? Obviously there is some threshold between human-generated music and AI-generated music, right? And, let's say that there is, do you see a point where AI-gen music would cross into, and would somehow resonate more with listeners than human-generated music?
I would love to answer this, if that's cool with you. Because I have a really strong take with this.
Cool.
And I'll even admit that I think I was wrong. You know, in the beginning when I first came in, the reason why we built our company is because I was so against AI generated music. And I said, that will never be the future, and that's the perspective of all artists. And I come from the entertainment industry. I'm not a tech guy. My co-founder has scaled music tech startups before. He's an engineer, he has a background. But when I came here, I saw how great the technology was and how it could truly help people. You know, we've obviously talked to Suno before, we've talked to Udio. Transparently, I was so against it in the beginning, right? But as I got to learn more about the companies and what they were doing, I realized there's a way for both appetites to be filled. And don't take this the wrong way, just follow with me here as to what I'm going to say. I believe AI generated music is like fast food now. So imagine as like human generated music as like gourmet dinners, right? Like it used to take a lot of work for people to make good quality music.
Right.
You know, you had to have a record label behind you, you had to have a budget behind you. But to your point with what you said with, you know, the Facebooks of the world, the MySpaces of the world, and flash forward to the SoundClouds of the world.
Yeah.
Anybody can just make a song. And that's when we started to see the transition of kind of like fast food music. And don't get me wrong, sometimes fast food music can be good, right? I might go down the street and today I might want some McDonald's. But if I really want a good dinner with, you know, some of my friends and we want to celebrate, we're probably going to go to a more nice place. And so this is where I think Udio and Suno fit in as well. They do have a platform where you can make that type of AI generated music. But there is nothing that connects more when you hear a musician that has actually went through something, right? So if I have music that I want to listen to, like let's say Biggie and Tupac never made a song together, but in this moment I'm like, I would love to itch that scratch and to be able to listen to something for right now. I'm not gonna listen to that for the rest of my life, but just like fast food, I'm gonna have it every now and then and listen to it. But I love Kanye. He's one of my favorite artists of all time, not for all the extra stuff that he does, so don't get too crazy or come at me, but for who he is as an artist, right? And what he did when we were younger, I think he pushed so many boundaries. And for my life, right, like he had songs that were soundtracks to certain moments for me. And that's something that I'm always gonna go back to for the rest of my life. I don't think I'll go back to certain AI songs, but I will go back to those human generated songs. And now to bring it full circle, for Suno and Udio, as I got to talk to them more, obviously there's going to be a market for those types of AI generated songs, but what it's also doing is helping artists use it like a tool, like auto-tune. So you could argue that auto-tune is like AI, and we've already been having access to this type of technology, and that's not really human generated music because people aren't naturally hitting those tones. And so I think Udio and Suno are allowing people to now also be a human being that's using this product to get those sounds that they were never able to before. And I think it's like that hybrid that we're going to get to that's really going to help push this whole thing to another level.
I love that like analogy of like fast food. I think I completely agree. I think
Me as well.
it's definitely just dependent on like the user and like what part of the market you're trying to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for us, I kind of look at like music as this like pyramid triangle. At the top, you've got your like Drake, Kanye, Beyonce. That's great, and like all their lives and the music production, the marketing, and the distribution is all handled like white label. That's great, or white glove. At the very bottom, you have then kind of like the royalty-free like insurance jingles on the commercials, and in the very middle, which is like the vast majority of music by a landslide, you actually really have quality music.
Yeah.
But just like those people that make it just are simply unable to market and distribute. So I think, you know, where AI music is going to really flourish is at that bottom portion. But to your point, I mean, I was just telling you, we were just in LA, and the amount of startups that are, you know, not necessarily taking an all or nothing stance is it's like 9 out of 10 companies. It's not just like this is net new music every time. A lot of them are like, all right, how can we like take the artist that does 90% of the work and just make it perfect with last time. So,
and I realized too that like as much as the artists want to fight it and I want to fight it and all these people want to fight it, it's happening anyways. There's billions of dollars being pumped into this. It's going to happen one way or another, and you're either going to be a part of it and allow that to take you to like the new heights of your career, or just be taken back. And as long as you're doing it ethically in your own way that you're comfortable with, then to your point, you know, the royalty-free music industry will flourish with the AI music, and some people will just use it as a tool. So that's how I feel about it.
I mean, I think both takes make a lot of sense, and you know, I don't know how much I told either of you about what doing with the club right now, but all of us are split into subgroups where we're working on different fields of research. Like I'm one of 2 leaders in the audio to music subgroup where we're working on a gen model similar to, I don't know how familiar you guys are with the papers music gen and instrument gen. something inspired by that to be able to explore how we can create new music with that. And many of our group members are working on similar projects. So, I don't know, both of your takes make a lot of sense in the context of like, it's going to exist. And, where do we go with it? And I think a lot of our members feel similarly. I don't mean to speak for everyone all at once here, but I guess going off of that, you also mentioned, and to a good point, using these tools ethically. Where do you see those lines being crossed, and where, as developers and as musicians, do you guys think we should work to not cross those boundaries?
Maybe the impersonation part, and that kind of goes into what you're doing. I think there needs to be a lot of work, and somebody needs to come in to make sure that if I wanted to pretend to be Drake and drop a fake single and put it up on Spotify or make my own little sub website, and then that drives a lot of traffic and I make a lot of money from that, Drake should license his voice and people should make that to protect them from people doing that. And then maybe, it's so complex, and this is where like I don't know the answer, because then even when you say that, then you're like, okay, well then should that song now be taken down, or should they keep it up and Drake still makes money off that song because they're using his voice? I don't have the answers for that, and I'm not gonna act like I do, but maybe you do.
I feel like I'm not smart enough to like really like talk in depth about this, but there's I was just talking with the co-founders of Musical AI. I don't know if anyone's heard of it.
Yeah, I think in passing I might have posted about them on LinkedIn at one point.
Yeah, awesome company. They're making like a lot of progress in getting the buy-in from rights holders, which is something that might be the hardest part about actually building like generative AI music. That's one company, and just today I saw a post. It's either Gemma or Gemma. They have like a new payout system, which is, I think, if I had it right, I only read like for 10 minutes a day, but it's almost like a subscription model that the artists together get paid out for the most part from that subscription revenue. It's not like a pay-per-use. I think that's just one. I don't know if that's necessarily the correct answer. Very neutral, but I just think it's great to see that people are kind of finding a way to say like, okay, how can we do this ethically? Because to your point, it's not going anywhere.
Oh, that makes sense. And there's another company, I don't know if either of you know, but I've been talking with the co-founders of them, Lemonade. They do MIDI generation through their Gen AI platform. And the way that they do that is they will source out artists, and it's a similar payment system where I think it's a contract-based thing where the producers will give their stems, so it's like an extension of themselves in which they can make money from when people use their tracks.
Okay. Yeah, there's a alum from NYU, database AI?
Not as familiar with them, but I've heard the name probably.
Yeah, I had one of the founders, Nicholas, on over at campus a year ago, and they have something similar. They have, instead of just one model, they have like a model for every producer, and they're the ones that have the power to upload what they want and whatnot, which I think is a very cool model.
That's awesome.
So,
okay, this brings me into something else where I'm sure you guys know about this, and most of us do. The lawsuit with Sumo Audio that was very recent, and I think there was an admission by one of the companies, I'm forgetting which one, to the copyrighted data. So, I guess what I want to know from you guys is music founders in this sort of, like, you're involved in the AI scene, but you're sort of in this outside perspective from the Gen scene. And so what I want to know is your perspectives on like what would the implications be for licensing, for copyright, for assisting musicians in the future? Not all at once. Maybe we'll focus on licensing.
I'm trying to think on licensing. I honestly, I am happy I'm not in the seat of some of the other founders in that ballpark. As partly when me and my co-founders were talking about where to go with the startup, that was as actually we're looking at companies like Suno and Udo. It's tough. I don't know the correct answer. You mentioned one of them is just somewhat maybe admitted some compelling pieces, but I don't have a great answer. We're not really that affected, and if anything, We're just kind of like watching on the sidelines.
That's fair. I think a lot of us are as well. We're sort of, I mean, I think that the technology itself is very impressive. And then, you know, it goes to show that generating music at that level is possible. And it's been like, what, maybe 2 years since ChatGPT had their rollout. And, you know, since then we've had all of this research, you know, booming, which is great, I think, on the tech side of things. But, you know, the ethics do raise a point of like, you know, where should we go with this? I don't know if you have a take on that as well.
Well, I think it's hard, right? It's like the same thing with social media, like when they were selling like customer data and everything, and it was hard to like really navigate that, and all these social media companies were just trying to race to be like the biggest one, because then they would deal with all the fines later. And I think there's kind of like, not an arms race, but like both the music companies are trying to go past it, because as soon as all that drama is over, they're shooting to the top, right?
Right.
And so they have nothing in front of them to stop them. I think it's just only time will tell. You know, there is no clear answer. We just have to wait.
I will say too, a lot of the talks in the music industry, specifically last week in LA, was they used the phrase listen versus play. Like there's a listen economy, which is their traditional form of consumption when it comes to music. That's basically just like Spotify, Apple, SoundCloud, Amazon, iTunes, whatever. That's great. That's been like the bedrock of music from the beginning of time. But the music industry got burned with Napster, obviously. They recovered, and then they got just kneecapped by Spotify again. And there's this level of apprehension that's still very much in the air over there. Where is it going to go? You know, how do you now? They now realize that they have to move from listen to play. And play is now making music much more collaborative and interactive, even at the user level. You don't obviously have to be a musician to do that. What is that? How does the business model look like when it comes to that play music economy? I think that's kind of the conversation going on now. So it's good to see that even those major rights holders, those major decision makers that can basically decide everything that goes on in the music industry, they've coined that phrase, so that means they're getting somewhere.
That makes sense. I guess the next thing I'm wondering is, do you think that anything coming of this will be able to help artists that are, you know, traditional, in the sense of like, you know, they're undergoing a normal process of, you know, writing, getting produced, and such. How do you see AI tools like Suno, Udio, Music.ai, just, you know, the ones that you're familiar with, how do you foresee them helping artists grow?
Well, I mean, nowadays being an artist isn't just being an artist. It's being a content creator. It's being a video editor. It's being a networker. It's being, sometimes some of these guys are even producers. That you have like 10 different hats that they have to wear. And I've seen some of the guys who have really embraced all the AI tools where they were so against it like a year or two ago, right? Naturally, when big technology comes in, everybody's against it. You've seen it with internet, you've seen it with computers, you've seen it with telephones, you've seen it with social media, and then everybody conforms just because it's more convenient and it's more easier. I think right now we're in this weird in-between state where a lot of artists have to wear a lot of different hats, because you have to be good at social media, you also have to be good at recording music, you also have to be good at performing, you also have to be good at building a community. AI tools do help with that. And, you know, Sam Altman said that you're going to see, you know, billion-dollar companies run by one person now because of all these AI tools, right? But you're also going to see the Post Malones and the Drakes of the world, and they don't have anybody on their team. The same thing is going to happen in music, but there has to be that special somebody that's creative enough who can utilize it in a way where they can communicate their vision and make sure everything's very cohesive with like their branding and everything, but then also being open-minded enough to use AI. Because I know those stubborn creatives, they don't want to use AI. And so I think, to answer your question, I think AI tools will help. And I think we will see a massive, massive artist that has nobody on their team. You already see it a bit now. I think Post Malone's team is a little bit bigger, but he's like an anomaly in the fact that like he has this crazy superstardom with a very, very lean team. And it's just going to get smaller and smaller from there.
I could not agree more. I think, I think there's a lot of focus on like the generative part of how an artist can use a certain model and make music. But I think where there's a lot of progress being made is actually kind of on like the admin side. So it's like the marketing, distribution, the PR, because to your point, everyone's wearing a different hat. And realistically, like, you can be a phenomenal artist, but you're just horrible at social media. You're horrible at content creation. We've seen a lot of success. There's a lot of other startups are doing really, really well in that space.
So would it be fair to say that, AI tools, at least from your takes, they're going to help artists like lighten the load on themselves in terms of what they have to do to exist in, this digitized world that we've created for ourselves?
Yeah, you know how in tech right now, there was like a huge craze of like indie hackers?
Yeah.
Like people are making like 400K MRR living in Indonesia, and they're building this really niche like micro website, and every engineer doesn't want to be an Elon anymore. They want to be like Peter Levels, if you guys are familiar with him. He's like the guy for indie hacking. And I think for musicians, the connotation is that being an indie musician sucks. Like you're unemployed, you're broke or whatever. But being an indie hacker, oh, you're killing it. You're in Indonesia, living up your life. You just have money coming in every month. I think, or hopefully, I hope that there will be a future where those indie musicians will be able to have that same kind of conversation where they're like, oh, they're an indie musician. They own a majority of their music, or they're able to create music from anywhere, go on their own tours, and have that be the new wave instead of signing a massive, record label deal and, giving everything away. I just had one of my friends who I knew in college, he gave me a call last week and he said his brother got, I don't even know if I should be saying this, but I already started. He got offered $15,000 for, 60% of his music. And I told him, I said, don't take that. I said, that's the worst deal you could get offered. And if that's the first deal that he's getting offered, imagine when he, gets some videos behind him, some marketing behind him, you could easily, up that number. It's just like raising a valuation for your company. You don't want to take a bad deal from a VC. That's why you bootstrap beforehand. That's why you do a private round, and then you go and get a bigger deal. And for musicians, he's like, man, I don't have a producer, I don't have a marketing team, I don't have this, I'm just gonna take it. And I sat on the phone with him for like an hour and I told him, do not take it, he still took it. Wow. But that's the thing, because if people are not going to use these AI tools and they're against that, but they also don't have the ecosystem around them to be able to push themselves like that, they're kind of put in a corner where they have to. Whereas in tech, you have like this tech stack where you can like basically automate everything and things are really easy for you. So I guess maybe it boils down to like an education problem, right? Like, because for engineers, people are learning about the newest tech, whereas a musician, there's not really these like institutions or organizations or these platforms that are really teaching you as much as they should be. I'm sure there's some, I don't want to generalize here, but maybe what some of these bigger companies like Suno and Udio could do is also teach people how to use not only their product, but also other like AI tools as well.
Keep going.
No, I love the educational aspect there. Because I think when you are an artist, and especially when you're an independent artist, I think the number, there's like 105 or 108 separate sources of revenue that an artist has to sign up for. You have to go do that one by one. I'm talking about like the PROs and any of the other royalty collection programs, and that's across the entire world. No one really knows that, and no one knows how to do that. No one has the time to do that. And so to your point, it's like, it doesn't maybe have to help you with the music, but it's actually helping you get educated on like how to stay on top of your money, how to stay on top of what's a good decision moving forward, because you're on your own. I think that's a great tool for that.
Both of those takes make sense. I know, like, I personally am taking a business of entertainment minor with my music tech degree, and that's taught me a lot of literacy in that field that you're talking about, like making sure that you're registered with the PRO, making sure that your stuff is licensed properly, making sure that you know how to capitalize on merch, for example. And one thing I'm thinking about is I wish for music tech students that like the course that I learned that from was more like, it was either talked about more or it was a requirement, because I feel like as producers, we're very good. We learn to be very good at engineering. We learn to develop our chops in, how we compose and, how we market ourselves as producers to potential clients. But we don't learn as much about how to fend for ourselves as musicians in the industry. And, I think that's really important to know about, especially with this changing landscape that we're creating for ourselves.
And definitely with, people always question the relevance of the major rights holders organizations, specifically the record labels. Back in, Johnny Cash's era, a record label was bringing the artists out, fronting a lot of cash, I still do that, but funneling a lot of cash and saying, this is, go make your music, we'll help you, support you in everything you do. And yeah, they're throwing a lot of money, but to your point, to your example, I mean, it can be super predatory. And so how can you be an artist, get around that, still protect yourself? If anything, I would be, as a rights holder organization, I would not only be worried about how my music data is being infringed, but I would also, they're continually trying to say, how are we staying relevant in this industry? And I think it's kind of like a two-bag problem.
So do you think there's a point where those pegs would converge effectively?
I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of people for the last 10 years, and even just some of our mentors have said, like, everyone always thinks that these massive companies are going to go down, or they're going to get, hurt again. I mentioned Napster, Spotify.
Yeah.
Spotify less so, but streaming just objectively did not pan out the way that everyone thought it was going to be. They're pretty damn strong, and they have a very strong legal team. So I don't think they're very smart people.
Yes.
And they're great people, great organizations, but I think they're being pretty proactive at this point.
I mean, that's fair enough. I mean, I've met a couple of the researchers from both Suno and Udio, and they're very passionate about what they do, to their credit. And I think that, I think that a lot of us feel the same way about the tools we're developing. So, there's a lot of common ground. And, I think what they want to do is make something that helps people, even if not everybody sees that at the same time. I'm also doing a time check here. I want to open it up to the people on Zoom as well as the people here, but for questions. Before I do that, question for both of you is, in the current ecosystem we have, let's say you could have any tool you want in the industry right now. What would your ideal tool be?
Well, like, would I be speaking from like a perspective of like an artist, or just like as a founder? What specifically?
Honestly, okay, I would think more like, I guess either as an artist or, you worked in like booking and A&R. So something along either the artist perspective or the industry perspective, your pick.
Well, this would be an incredible time for me to plug my company, but I'm not going to do that. If I were to be, like, let's say I would just want whatever I want. I mean, to be honest, if I was an artist, which I used to be in high school, I used to make music. My music was trash. It's like, okay, I'm going to do something around music, right? And I think the best thing that artists need right now is like more exposure. You can get this stuff figured out in terms of what's it called, like creating the music and stuff like that, because there's already some platforms out there.
Yeah.
And I think getting your music out there and then also learning how you can monetize like your platform are the two best things. So if I were to pick one, I guess getting more exposure, like kind of something like a Hootsuite. But let's say you have like a music video, you upload it, and then it instantly like formats all the content to all different like socials or whatever, and then maybe Instagram Reels like don't really push videos that have captions or whatever on it, but maybe TikTok does, right? What if there's like a company that had access to the data to see what works better on the algorithm, and then charge that as a premium, so everybody's obviously not using it because then it wouldn't work for everybody.
Yeah.
But something where I could just like put a music video, or if I'm an artist, let's say I put up a podcast, and then it cuts up all the best parts of it, and then it immediately posts it like within one click everywhere.
So it'd be like utilizing the brain of something like Roster, and then allowing that to determine, what are the best, what's like the highlight reel.
Yeah.
And generate something for people to see, for people to figure out, like, do I like them or not?
Yeah, it would be like Hootsuite and like CapCut together, but then it also looks at the data of like which pieces of content did the best, and then when it cuts up the next time, it still has that memory, and then it knows to only upload those types of topics.
Wow.
I would use that for sure. Yeah.
We just built a whole marketing department for like an artist, you know what I mean?
I think I would pick a tool that can just take every single music rights in the world and just like keep it fresh. And that's data rights management has been, it's like its own sub-economy in music. It's so big and it's such a problem. But with so many different artists all around the world, so many artists now using samples from years ago, decades ago.
Yeah.
All these little side room deals and publishing, and people pass away, people sell their rights.
Yeah.
It's so beyond complicated, and it's just working in tech and working in consulting before this whole life right now. Like, so many companies still operate on Excel. I'm talking like public company, like insane, like confidential from I'm like, why are you still like everything's still so localized and offline? It is a huge problem, not just for us, but really anyone that works in music. So I love just a single source of truth. That's all I ask. That easy.
I think I can resonate with that. I think anyone who's like had to deal with metadata can definitely understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, no, it sucks.
But I think those are both great ideas. So I want to open it up to everybody. Anyone in person or online, if you guys have questions, yeah.
I really love what you said about finding the common ground of like both sides of the perspective. And like I think people in MIR and in terms of audio, we can definitely focus on the tools that will make artists' life better, make producer life better. Like we actually go into the nitty-gritty details of like how to extract the melody and align the lyrics with the music video, and maybe that would help with picking out the highlight reels. And we also work with like music similarity searches, and that's like a big thing in recommender systems, and will like help you decide which top of the pyramid songs that you focus on. And there's actually a new algorithm that's it's very active research, but people in MR is trying to figure out a way to calculate royalty of generated audio for like 1 million songs in their training corpus, like how much did each song contribute to the final output. So I think that's the best thing that we can hope for. That's the best offer that we have from our end. Hopefully that. Do you think that's is that
like a step in the right direction?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Definitely. It seems difficult, not only on the technical side, but more so, we've seen so many both parties. It's not just 1-2 parties. It's sometimes like 20 parties. They're all having their input on this. I think the hardest part is who's winning the most and who's losing the most, and how lucky can they be will be the deciding factor of like what's the most amicable outcome.
So what if like we decide actually the model outputs that these 100 artists all contributed to this final melancholy jazz song that was do you think the licensing side have the technology to actually format all the things, calculate all the royalties?
Yeah, from our perspective, you're asking like on our platform. Yeah, we only take what the owners say they own, and that is verified kind of in a network. But if you were to say this is a song with 10 writers and that's it, and someone paid $100, then yeah, we can. Our whole platform does direct deposit payments from the buyers. So in that world, yes, we can absolutely.
Can I ask a follow-up? I had a separate question in mind, but I think I want to ask a follow-up. So this whole idea of trying to identify what portion of the training set has contributed to the output and by extension to the revenue presupposes that the company who created the model and trained the model is going to be extremely transparent, right? Because there's no detection tools at this point, right? So what's the incentive for a company to say, here's exactly how we do it, And by the way, your music that we lifted out of this database, went behind the paywall, the regular user license, lifted whatever we wanted. So that's your portion of the royalty. Obviously, there's a lot of lack of trust. So what's going to motivate a change in those practices?
Oh, I think from our perspective, I'll answer like briefly. You know, we just like to say, like, let's answer like right now, today, snapshot of what we see today. And to your point, a lot of those companies are not forthcoming with a lot of the training data, or at least the end outputs of who actually owns that. And obviously, the provenance and attribution there. So therefore, we don't see an incentive for those companies to license out their music, at least on like the commercial setting. That seems to be, you know, everyone, they stay on their side, and like the rest of, you know, your typical record labels and publishers with human artists are staying on the other side, and there's not that much tension. I say that as today, October 28th, 2024.
Yeah, and the forces are not necessarily taking us in the protection direction. You know, leave it alone, it can only become worse.
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned kind of the triangle of three types of songs. I'm really oversimplifying that, but on the bottom of that, you have the royalty-free stuff. And I think if we're eventually, if we wanted to license that out, not necessarily interested in that today, it would be, the money would go to, or the revenue would go towards that company, because I would assume that they would just say we own this outright, since it is, you know, royalty-free, or we own it. If that makes sense.
Of course, there's a lot of training data that's not necessarily royalty-free, and in fact, the best, you know, the lowest tier that you describe, especially if it's already generated, is kind of recycles bad stuff, right?
Yeah.
You know, what we want is the best of what's human right now, and that's typically not royalty-free, right?
It's
and rightly so. But
yeah.
we know who's lifting that, you know. But you know, in my humble opinion, there has to be legislation which will eventually require audits.
But that's going to take a long time.
Oh yeah, because companies are saying is like that stifles creativity, right? That's a typical thing, right?
Yeah.
That's the catch-all, right? But we need to know what's happening under the hood for everybody's protection. And I'm sure certain areas are going to be a catch-up faster than that, because, you know, artistic consumption is such a low-risk activity, right? Mm-hmm. If it's a black box model that magically performs neurosurgery, you say, okay, how is it working? I need to know, right? Yeah. But hey, I'm having fun with this music, you know, nobody has an incentive to say, except the poor artist who doesn't get the proper royalty, you know?
Yeah, and that's why I think it comes back down to education or like legislation, because you really, I mean, education is not going to fight the whole thing. It's going to go on anyways, but you hope that the next big artist, right, like that comes up, that is that Post Malone level, isn't going into that system and falling for those traps. And then he can set an example. Like right now, what they're doing with Drake doesn't need a record label, but do you know why they give him such a phenomenal deal? Even like more than like what he's valued, because if he leaves the record label system, there's going to be millions of artists who now think that they don't need a record label when they walk into these big majors. And so that's kind of like the example. We need somebody to be like a trailblazer. We need somebody to be independent on that big level until we get that legislation.
Actually, it's the education that will push toward the legislation.
You're right. Yes.
Not only of the artists, but also the consumers.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm going to use the generic label, because the whole concept of the passive consumer is problematic right there. Mm-hmm. But that's a longer conversation, right? Yeah, I mean, in so many cultures, music is communal, right?
Yeah.
You go to West Africa, the whole village is dancing, right? But our model, our business model, is based on people who simply click a button and get whatever they want, right? Yeah. That limits what music is, right? Yeah. But this is where the bucks, you know, this is where money is, though.
There is
right. So anyway, yeah.
No, there is a lot of independent curation, and that's sort of, I think, what you're getting at, and I think what they're getting at as well. Does anyone else have questions? Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, you guys and Thomas as well talked about like the participation aspect, how play is important. Do you guys have any like concrete examples of that, or like maybe like different samples of music or music producers working together with in like a maybe like remote kind of way? Is it like streaming on Spotify Live? I don't know. What do you think it looks like to have play as an important component to music, and how do you think that can be monetized for the music industry to thrive?
It could be like virtual and physical in a way, because right now there's already like the new meta of like younger artists is they go on BandLab. But like before Suno and Udio were here, was like they would go on BandLab and 6 to 7 people would get on Discord, and then they just like punch in and then share files. And so maybe now you pay for subscription and you don't need the engineer to spend 10 hours. The engineer will still be using, you know, these tools to make your voice sound better, but instead of taking 10 hours to mix and master like a full album or song or whatever, you just use Udio, and it cuts that time in half. It's like with CapCut, right? Video editing is not gone. I used to be a video editor. I actually get paid more now when I do like freelancing video editing stuff, because like my quality is better with the tools that I have now, and AI is helping with that, right? So I think there is like a way to spin it. But I think, yeah, virtually that's the way that it'll happen, and physically, you know, you come into a studio like this, and instead of telling the engineer, hey, put some auto-tune on my voice, you say, hey, use Udio to change my voice like this. So the engineer will still be using it, and it's not really changing, it's just speeding up the process, and we hope that the quality music is what makes it up top. Like if more people are coming into this industry and more people are producing music, yes, there will be a bigger market, and yes, there will be more lower quality music, but like subsequently there's also going to be more higher quality music, because the most talented people are going to make it to the top, right? Because like if you look at like phones, for example, right, beforehand like iPhones were only available in certain parts of the world, but now everybody has a phone. Even if you don't have a lot of money, you know, sometimes like people in like third world countries now have iPhones as well. There might be a very talented or a very smart individual that now has access to that technology, where he can kind of break through of his environment and be able to showcase his skills, whether that be through music or even through like creating like the next big tech company. Yeah, and I'm just rambling. I'll let you take it from here.
No, I think I'm taking your question way too literally, because I have two examples. I was just talking with the founders at a gaming company, and then like a loop, a pedal company. And the first one was, it uses AI to like help find, the company's called Soloist. I saw them pitch, a great company, great founding team. They use the AI system to be able to, you can play and put in your samples and your stems and whatever. It'll find like, I'm looking for like a drummer or percussion to help me, and this is going based off of what your samples sound like for like a given session, like jam session. And it will find throughout the country, throughout the world, someone that can kind of like vibe with that. So it's connecting musicians from all over the world that aren't just like interested, but actually like objectively, maybe subjectively, actually play well together. So that's one example. And then the gaming one was they're making AI generated music as you play the game. So it's not new. It's new music every single time. And depending on like, I don't know if you're like a fighting game, like you just start like throwing your sword around, then the music starts to change. If you're on like trucking simulator, like maybe it's a pretty boring sound, but something like the music is always different. So those are two like literal examples of how I see play doing pretty well in music.
Yeah, that's really cool. Thanks.
Yeah, those are very good examples.
I was just talking to him, so that's the only reason I have.
Maybe like hypotheticals. It's good for us to have a perspective of that, I think, just to see like, what goes beyond just developing, like what are we developing for? Along those lines, does anyone else have any questions?
Is it online?
So to anyone online, you guys are welcome to ask questions as well. I don't know where the mic is, so
we'll hear them say unmute.
All right. Yeah, feel free to unmute, and if you have a question. All right. Not everyone has to go at once. Okay.
I guess I can ask a question to the crowd. I have some that I would love to ask everybody here. Now that we have technology like this for people to just easily be able to make music, do you guys feel like you want to start making music because that's a little bit more accessible, or has that never even crossed your mind? And I guess anybody can answer. Because now the technology is here for you to sound like the next Michael Jackson, right? So what's stopping you from doing it?
I'm a music analyst, by the way. So I want to say that, I totally want to embrace it. But for one thing is, as you said, it's unrealistic. Not only is it unrealistic to say, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do it my way, the old way. But if I don't do it with the experience, and I've been around for a while, even the term AI has shifted in the ways that I've tracked in my career, right?
Of course, yeah.
Everybody who's new to this field has one definition of AI, right? Well, my knowledge goes back to the 50s. I mean, I wasn't around the 50s, but you know what I'm saying, you know. So if it's not people with broader perspective, which I humbly, say, because I come from, I'm not specifically going out to say, what's the technology out there? How do I use it? But I have questions already that I have been asking and say, oh, this tool is going to help me, right? If the more educated people in the music community don't embrace AI, it's going to go in the way of the world. A lot of money, I don't want to say it diplomatically, right? But like profit for its own sake. But what we can do, you hit the nail on the head. The word is education. Educate and I appreciate both of you being on the side of the artist and on taking the artist as a starting point, not just let's make money. This is such a great money machine. So many people are saying that, but I think the students, the scholars, amateurs, right? There's people who have the music gene but never had the chance to pursue anything because of life circumstances, whatever. To have a much broader use cases, and then we can gently, as an educated community, we can gently lead things correct way. So I'm all for it. Let's try everything. Worst thing is it doesn't work, right? Worst thing is the act is done, right?
Yeah.
But if we say no, AI is bad, I think we wouldn't be the losers.
I think that's a pretty good take. So I mean, what I'm hearing is that we should be ready to embrace these new technologies. I think that makes sense. I think that's the reason that most of us are here. And so I guess, okay, first I want to know if anyone else has an answer to what Ilias asked. And if not, I guess the last thing I would ask is, what advice would you guys give to our club and our members about developing generative music tools?
Why don't you take this one?
All right. I think it's advice for what you guys are doing now, and also just as you guys are leaving. I'm not sure if this is a mix of masters and undergrads, so apologies. But whatever.
It is. We are a cross school club.
Okay, amazing. I mean, I think you're really good at this too. Whatever you're trying to get into, just get out into the street and be extremely. I think so many people, there's so many smart people in this world, you guys all in this room, included, that are all kind of trying for somewhat the same thing. I'm not discounting anything you guys are working on. You could say the same thing about what we're doing over at Cypher. A lot of people are trying to do it. But it's about your ability to be able to communicate that and vouch to the people that it's actually going to be affecting, and getting the buy-in from decision makers that, better or worse, kind of hold the success to you. So get out on the street, speak to the artists, speak to the producers, speak to the people on the corporate side. Because that is the only way you're going to actually be able to make a lot of progress faster than you like. And also be loud. Again, I think whether you can go into a room and take the room by the palm of your hand because you're just really good at speaking, or if you can make just killer content online and it really just resonates with people, or something completely different, use that. You all have something that you're really, really good at. Be loud and be intentional with it.
I think you hit something too that I really like that you said. You said speak to the artists, because I went to these labels, I went to some of these bigger music tech companies, and they're not really talking to the artists like they say that they are. Especially in tech, people don't want to get on. There's this culture now in tech where people don't want to get on Google Calendar calls unless it's really important. They just want to stick to email. They only want to focus on the things that scale. But I think when you're building at the intersectionality of music and tech, you have to focus on the things that don't scale. That's exactly what you're referring to. And just even talking to an artist, like a 1-hour conversation, yeah, you might have been able to talk to an investor and raise X amount of money within that 45-minute frame or whatever, or maybe you would have closed a partnership, but longevity-wise and for artist satisfaction, because you see these platforms come and go, and yes, they can make a lot of money in a short amount of time, one of the real reasons why we see them not last for a long time is because the artists don't like the model, and eventually gets to a point where it's just not going to work out long term, and you have to find a new solution, and go through the same cycle over and over and over again. So I think a great way to tie it all up together is like focus on the things that don't scale like that.
That is, I think that's
And
pretty.
investors don't want to hear that, and people who have big companies don't want to hear that. But hey, you want artists to be happy, focus on the things that don't scale.
I mean, I think a lot of us here started out as artists or doing artistry work on the side. So I think that's pretty sound advice. And okay, I do actually have one last question for you guys. How can any of our members stay in contact with you guys?
Maybe just grab us on LinkedIn. I'm sure you'll probably put a post up later tonight, or we'll put something up, and our info, or there was a flyer, just look up our names on LinkedIn, and we'd love to connect with you guys there.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for so much for being here and speaking with us. I think I can speak for all of us when I say we really appreciate you coming down.
Thank you. This is great.